So let's talk about loading data into your data warehouse. You do that through something that is called an ELT or ETL process. Any idea what it stands for? And it has nothing to do with the EAT. It stands for extract, loading, and transforming. And ETL stands for extraction, transforming, and then loading. And the ETL process always was a norm until recently. Now we do a little bit the other way around. And I would like to illustrate what this looks like. So we've talked about data sources a lot. Data sources in our marketing world can be anything from an analytics provider, an ads provider, SEO data like Flipstream. It can be marketing automation. It can be a customer data platform like Squeezely, also Dutch, like Flipstream, or Segment, not Dutch. It can also be, like we mentioned during the data lake conversation, Excel files or CSV files or JSON files or any file type, images literally could be used. And we also talked about the fact that they can be different databases that you own as a company, or maybe it's a third party like Stripe that has all your payment data, your PIM. So you want to also get and fetch all your product information data and get that maybe into your data warehouse to combine that with maybe other Google Analytics for sales data, whatever. Anything is possible. All the sources that you see here, you could work with as a marketeer, or you work with as a marketeer, and you might want in your data warehouse so that you can start centralizing the view on all of this. So how do we do that? Well, in both cases, like the ETL or the ELT process starts with extraction. We extract this data, and then in the ETL version, it's going to be transformed. Transformation literally means applying business logic. Like I talked earlier about the transformation of URL formats, but it could literally all be about anything. It could be about, okay, how do we as a business think about revenue numbers in a warehouse perspective? Maybe you want to be so precise that you're going to make sure that everything is based on thousands behind the comma, which means that when you're visualizing it, you can multiply it by 1,000, and then you are like very precise from a maybe 2 decimals behind the comma perspective. And maybe you don't want that. Maybe you don't need that, and you just want it stored normal. These are things that you need to think about when you are setting up your data warehouse. And in general, they don't change because then you need to change everything in your data warehouse. So it's important to have conversations here when you're making decisions about how business logic gets applied to all your data. What is your preferred view? We'll make this very practical later in the course because we're going to be doing all of this, right? After the transformation, it gets pushed into the data warehouse. It gets loaded. It is possible that if you have the data lake set up, you just do the extraction and then it just lives inside of your data lake. You don't do anything with it. And then you transform it and load it into your data warehouse system. This is kind of like this is still happening a lot. And very often this transformation process then actually happens inside the tool that you're using to do the extraction and the transformation. And maybe even the loading into their data warehouse. This is something that I was actually doing when I was working for Staples. And we started there with our data warehouse back in 2016. And we were using Domo for this, great tool at the time. Doesn't fly with the way I think about it on 2024. But yeah, I really liked it because I had one place that I could just push all the data into, apply transformations, and it would automatically be loaded also because they are their data warehouse. And I could then use it in my visualizations. Nowadays, what happens and what is more preferred by data scientists and data engineers, and therefore also with us in a much smaller setting from a marketing perspective, we want to extract the data and load it immediately into our data warehouse, or you could call it data lake, and then apply the transformation. What happens is that we become owners of what the transformations are that we want to apply. It's always easier to do it this way and then also make changes, going backwards in time, etc. Okay, so why is this the preferred version of doing it? Well, you don't need to do the transformation somewhere in the cloud with somebody else tool or solution. For example, in Funnel or something. You don't want to be doing the transformations in there. Data is so cheap these days. It costs 1 cent per gigabyte once it's stored in a table, for example. Even when you're hosting it in a Google Cloud bucket, like all these Excel files, it's so cheap. Maybe that's like 2 cents or 20 cents a month for a gigabyte. Because everything is so cheap to own, you really want that business logic part in your own team, because it helps you to be way more flexible on how you're going to manage it and what you're going to be doing with it. Which means that the whole system, all of it together, is less reliable on a third party, more in your own control, and therefore a lot more scalable towards the future. Way easier to revert things, way easier to literally redo computations if you really want to do that and if you really need to do that. And therefore, this approach where you're extracting and loading it so that you just have it on-prem and then owning the business logic creation and definitions and transformations yourself is actually the way to go. So what are the tools that we're using for this actually to manage all of these? What are the names that you'll be hearing quite a lot? In the extraction and load part, you could go with fancy tool like Fivetran, super enterprise, Funnel, also super enterprise, Stitch, a little bit easier, Entray, like a little bit cheaper. I think it starts at $100 or something a month so that you can at least get some data into your data warehouse. And Flipstream, obviously, we load specific SEO data into your data warehouse. Like we can scrape the Google SERP, or we have a shopping SERP, Google business profiles, like all that data we take and we push it into your data warehouse so that you can actually analyze it and work with it. Those are examples of extracting or using a solution to extract data from somewhere else. And then they also load it into, for example, BigQuery. They don't store it themselves so that you can do the transformations inside those tools. They can do transformations, but you could also use them to just pipe data directly from the original source into the data warehouse. What Google offers is to do that inside of Google with their Google products. The Google Data Transfer allows you to transfer solutions like Google Ads data, Google BigQuery data, Search Console data, merchant data, you name it. All of that data you can get for free in BigQuery just by setting up the Google Data Transfer. And we will be looking at this extensively in the course further down the line, how to do that, for example. There will be some tutorials literally on how to set up a BigQuery, export for GA4. We're going to be setting up exports for Google Ads data, merchant. I'm going to show everything. And then there is the Google Data Manager, which is a solution from Google that they will actually take over from Stitch, or at least compete with Stitch, Funnel, Fivetran, all that type of solutions, where they allow you to send data from an original source directly into BigQuery. Makes you depending on Google, but it'll be free. Most of it will be free. You'll be paying some computational costs, but in general, it looks like it'll be tons cheaper than using a Fivetran, Funnel, or Stitch. More details on that for sure in the beginning of 2024, because it's not officially live yet. Transforming data, what we see on the right side, having that in our own control. We can start with scheduled queries inside Google BigQuery themselves, but you'll see that over time that becomes quite a lot to handle. And then you can like most of my work is with scheduled queries, because in the end, the marketing team doesn't need 560 different scheduled queries. And when you're an agency, you might get into hundreds. Then you should probably be looking into taking it out of scheduled queries and going into like a DBT solution or a data form solution, where DBT is data warehouse agnostic, and data form is very specifically, it's actually bought by Google, so it's focused on BigQuery. They both do the same, but they have different interfaces, and they help you to manage more complex SQL, period, and schedule them. But initially and during this course, we'll be focusing on scheduled queries, because the other two are, let's say, for advanced usage. They are definitely not something that we want to be looking at immediately. Yeah, and with that, we conclude chapter 2 of the SQL Masterclass for marketeers. And in the next chapter, we're really going to get our hands dirty, and we're going to start working with Google BigQuery. We're actually going to be doing our first SQL queries. So looking forward to show that to you and to let you play around there. And I hope you're ready for it. So see you in the next chapter. Bye.